You're talking about SSO implementation organization-wide. You're talking about zero trust kind of firewall activity.
Do you trust us?
IMDb, but yeah, that too.
That's a CMDB. Click the link below. The IMDb.
Which I'll mention quickly before you move on, which is it's coming to Europe, but the NIC.
Every time he says MFA, I'm like
MMA versus MFA. Yeah. But.
Guys, welcome. 2024 is upon us, and this is the InfoMatters podcast with Xtelligence. Danny is here. I am here.
I'm here.
And this evening we thought we'd start with a number of things, but cybersecurity, of course, is a bit as topical as the air we breathe. And rightly so. The threat, of course, is ever increasing. And we find ourselves this evening in our secret bunker, Danny.
Secret bunker?
Yeah, we're trapped here for the evening, which is fortunate because, Danny, we have our guest this evening.
We do. Just a quick intro. As you may have seen the teaser trailer, Kenny, myself, and also David work together in one of the largest blue chip logistics organisations running, I think, the biggest hardware integrations and operation system upgrades the world has seen. Since then, we've all moved into different roles.
Independently of each other.
Independently, and all in information technology security. One of the topics tonight being zero trust.
Yes.
And the guy we brought in, which we'll hand over to Mr. Stennett, is currently leading a large program, which he'll explain to us now.
Yes.
Ooh la la. All right, so zero trust. We hear this term a lot. So what does that mean for what I'm doing? Well, it means a lot of things. You're talking about SSO implementation organization-wide. You're talking about MFA, multi-factor authentication. Organization-wide, you're talking about IGA onboarding into a identity management system. You're talking about zero trust kind of firewall activity in the cloud, right? You're talking about cleaning up your AD groups, moving them in either to Azure AD or some other kind of system, and really just cleaning up your environment and doing as what you guys want to discuss, which is zero trust, which is you don't trust anybody.
Do you trust us?
Exactly.
Well, I trust Kenny and David. I think kicking it off, as Kenny will agree.
Yeah.
Most people say, "What is zero trust?"
Yes.
We have
a definition of zero trust. So,
but what are the principles that differ zero trust to existing,
kind of control mechanisms or cyber defenses? So I imagine some form of literally zero trust. So you trust nobody and nothing.
So the problem is that definition is a moving one. Right, and it can encompass many things. So, kind of originally, it was purely identity confirmation. Right, we don't trust anybody. You need to authenticate yourself. Right, so really, MFA started a lot of the zero trust in the industry, but it really includes the IGA, which we discussed earlier.
And IGA is
identity governance and access. Right, so you're using a central management, generally a system. I guess I don't want to start dropping product names, but a SailPoint.
We are not sponsored yet.
No, not sponsored. Yeah. So,
but please let us know if you want. Yeah, you can.
So click on the banner below. 20% commission.
So anyway, identity management system, right, where you really are cleaning up who can have access. So, generally we would use AD, right? You'd have AD groups, security groups, and do that kind of stuff. So now you're just taking it up another level to where you're cleaning things up. You're usually separating privileged accounts, right? So if you're a normal project manager or program manager now in the current organization with no elevated access, you don't really care, right? You're just a standard monkey on the network. But if you're an admin or a technical guy, you would then
elevated privilege.
Elevated privilege. So you have some kind of administrative access, right? Where you could do damage to the company. You're then moved into a different group where you might have MFA enforced on you, even though you're already on maybe a trusted network.
Yep.
Of course, that can get tricky with SD-WAN and other things, but you may have an ADM account, right?
Yep.
So you should not, all organizations listening, you should not have any privileged access on a standard user account. You should have
that's the concept of least privilege being applied,
Perfect.
But what if you are privileged?
Exactly. We're all privileged in some way, I guess.
No comment. So, so that's basically where we're going. So it really encompasses a lot of things now. So identity management, then firewalls, right? Who can get through? So Kenny belongs to this group. Should he have access to the company's most valuable assets? No, so that you can't even get to the front door to authenticate to an application. You're already blocked by the firewall or the cloud internet that you're working. Exactly.
So it's an extra. I mean, like I said, I just launched. Can't mention the company's name, Zscaler. But I mean, they're a global leader. Everyone's totally aware of them. And the steps that you took first were, first of all, you're identifying the user base. Then you're identifying the device.
Yep.
Then it's application layers, and then you're moving on to further, connectivity, your firewall level. So it's
all the way through that. There's this concept of zero trust. So you're constantly verifying
and continuity.
The user,
so
the device, the
is,
network, or a combination of, or indeed the app's access, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
and I did some years ago, and again, a certain large pharma company that we all know about did some PAM, privileged account management work. Again, can't mention the product, CyberArk. And we spent a world of time looking at access models. There's a lot of legacy work that goes in, and we should. The three of us have done project management for years, and you spend a significant amount of the start of the project doing discovery, establishing who has access to what.
Correct.
It's usually quite an unpretty, not too pretty a picture. When you realise a lot of people do use their elevated privilege accounts daily, they get used to it, that sort of stuff. It's not always the best way to do it. You need to basically revoke that, or indeed control that, and go back to this concept of least privilege. And we mentioned that, and actually, an interesting story. We should always have a story, keeps things relevant, right? Whereupon, David, I think you were across town in one organisation doing what I was fighting. What was the NotPetya attack, which was the harvest. Exactly, NotPetya was a payload that went round. Don't quiz me on the exact aim of the game or what it did, but essentially it would scrape the memory of target machines, and if there had been a login of an admin account, it would use those admin accounts to move laterally across networks. So when you factor in the zero trust approach and you trust nothing, these controls would prevent that lateral movement. And the impact that this company, where David was at the time, shall remain nameless, don't look at LinkedIn, I was across town using the privileged account management software, CyberArk, product to control the access, but I think you were doing network segmentation.
I was doing network segmentation, which is now almost old.
It's old. So multiple approaches to address the same issue, depending, of course, on the preference of the company. David makes a valid point. This was valid at a point. That approach was valid at a point in time. Things evolve.
I think what zero trust also is, from the way I understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, with Kenny and David, you're way more technical than I am, or I was. I have a very clear understanding from a technical overview, from running projects, is you've got access management, and what this has done is identify who the user is and what do you actually need to access.
Yes.
As opposed to giving access, with Active Directory permissions across the board. This is more geared to securing the application levels across.
Yeah, I think. Is it fair to say that? I mean, I haven't done absolute zero trust projects. I think it's fair to say all of our work has aspects of all the other cyber defenses and all that kind of stuff that we talk about. And so in the work that I was doing, you're always looking at what used to be cybersecurity loves an acronym. The RBACS model, role-based account, or role-based access, where you would look at what Danny does and what David does and what Kenny does. Now, as project managers, our jobs are mostly administrative firefighting. Can we say that?
Isn't that project management?
Wait, do you know that T-shirt? Life of a project manager. I'm on fire, everything's on fire, life's crap, but why would you be a project manager? Words to that effect, not quite that. We've all seen the T-shirt. Exactly. Whereupon our roles are broadly administrative. We don't have needs for administrative accounts. Therefore, we have, they would say, bog standard user accounts, and that suffices for what we want to do. We do work with people who have elevated privilege accounts, and it can be hard to convince them not to use those accounts on a day-to-day.
Well, if you're at the hierarchy of an IT infrastructure and you govern it, you want complete control.
Yeah. But they analyze the risk, right?
Well, you do, but then if you work in security, this is where you have to push back, right? This is the exchange with the organization itself, right? Business always wants the least amount of hindrance, right, in their day-to-day operations. They make the money or make the product, right? We work in pharma. You don't want to mess with a scientist making something that would help people, right? But on the other hand, you've got to prevent what we saw in 2017, right?
Yeah, which was horrendous. It cost this company
near $500 million, I believe, US dollars. So.
And then you've always got I want that. I need that. How to justify? I mean, we just rolled out the client connector, and you have to, as we always do, you have to whitelist applications and blacklist applications.
Yeah.
So users are used to going onto their desktop and accessing BBC. That's okay. Users are used to going to Gmail and downloading attachments. It's normal, the normal day.
Yep.
That doesn't work on a zero trust platform. It pixelates it.
Absolutely. I should ask. I mean,
it puts things into quarantine, which is,
I see.
The end user experience is very different to how we're used to.
Because I'm thinking, again, my infancy in not quite infancy, but I do other stuff. You guys do probably more recent stuff. They would say in zero trust. People would normally VPN in, two-factor VPN in, and that would be deemed secure, which again is a point in time things have evolved. Now you're looking at not only authenticating that access point to the network, but you're now looking at an additional app layer.
Indeed.
So the user layer, the app layer, the network layer, all that kind of stuff. Now a lot of this to the end user, we would hope ultimately would be mostly seamless. We know it's intrusive at the start because onboarding and, let's be honest, a bit sometimes getting that sort of config out and applied
indeed,
in a graceful way. Security by definition is intrusive.
As long as you don't pull the cord on the VIPs.
On the VIPs. You been there, Danny?
Yeah. Can we roll this out quickly? Sure. Do we have a change? Yes. Let's do it. Danny, you're fired. Okay.
We've all been there on those calls when they go, we know we did it fast. How quickly can we undo it, roll back, that sort of stuff. And of course, you've been on those calls where can we fix forward a rollback?
Another thing, I suppose, that's since COVID, the increase in home workers and bringing your own. So you bring in your own. You got your own devices. So I just started a new contract with a very large IT company.
Yeah.
And you used to get in a new laptop that's got a corporate build on it. It's locked down. The ports are locked. It's plug and play. Off you pop. Now I've got to use my own device, which obviously I'm not going to clean my home machine.
Nope.
So you have a Citrix worktop or a
containerized
Windows
environment.
desktop.
We would call it.
Works great, slightly different functionality than we're used to. But how does? I mean, I assume that's a huge advantage, especially in your programs rolling out to.
So in the organization I'm in, they really don't want to give out laptops anymore.
No.
I had to fight to get one as a project manager. I'm like, well, how am I going to work on it? On a VDI or Office 365, right? On my desktop at home while I'm on an airplane traveling, right? So like, okay, you got it. But for the most part, what organizations do is you create a CA policy, right? Control access policy, which is in this organization, if you have a device that is not from them, you're automatically MFA'd. Right?
Yeah, right.
And a lot of customers or vendors that work with us don't have MFA, right? So you might have a group of offshore people somewhere, and they don't all have a company phone. Maybe they don't want to put it on their phone. There's a bunch of, in some countries in Europe, you can't force them, right? Workers' rights laws and stuff.
And we were somewhere not too long ago where, yes, you could have a company phone, but you were getting a Nokia 2110. You were not getting a smartphone.
Yeah, so then you couldn't.
So, they shall remain nameless.
For example.
So you couldn't run.
Cold
you can't
in the phone.
You can use SMS, but a lot of these organizations don't want to use SMS or email because they're very outdated. So what you want to use is either a hard token like a YubiKey, right, which is. That causes problems with
like Windows
logistics.
Authenticator or Ping ID or something.
You can use Ping. Ping causes its own problems. We're actually trying to use that, but it causes different technical problems with Active Directory. There's no compatibility. Long story. Physical tokens, those are the best, but people lose them. You need to have them on stock.
They're not manageable, I guess, because you can't policy control them because they're not software controlled, right? So
they're not controlled, so they're basically fire and forget. You can, me and you, all three of us could use the same one. It doesn't matter. It's not tied to a person. It's tied to the key, right? So if you fire someone, they take it with them. You just remove it out of the profile. It's fine. It's off your network, and they can use it for banking. That's fine. But that's where you want to go. But again, additional costs. You kind of want to use, a lot of these organizations already invested into Microsoft, right? For better or for worse. So you want to use Authenticator. That's our organization's kind of primary one that we would like to use. But again, you're running into places that don't have phone or cell coverage, or you're working in a regulated space, right? You guys know about pharma. There's no devices allowed in
warehouse workers
zones.
Don't have phones or dedicated machines.
Exactly.
Yeah, you
different profiles. Yeah, profiles.
You have
profiles on. We just face that as a huge challenge.
Yeah. Because you're if you're looking into we should also divide which is part of my world right now, which is operational technology versus the classic IT, dare we say, where IT, information security, OT world is basically machine security, and historically devices have been stupid to do one job, that kind of stuff. If they're in heavily regulated environments, particularly production lines in pharma, or where I'm spending a bit of time now, which is the proper industrial end of this sort of stuff, they've been isolated environments for a long time, so they're not exposed. They're not exposed to threats, which is good. So it means that any threats that exist are not exploitable currently, or indeed in the past. That doesn't mean that the digitization of this stuff, when we plug that stuff in, exposes it, and of course, if it's never been updated, patched, all that kind of stuff, then we have all the issues we've seen.
Well, traditionally, you would have a separate network, right?
Yes,
a shop floor network,
but
that's all disappearing now with cloud internet, right? So this is one of the downsides of all these companies going to the cloud, right? I'm not a big fan of the cloud, but everyone's going to the cloud, and that's just the way it is.
There's always been this cloud adoption, which is the perceived benefit of.
And then you go to firewall layers as well, don't you?
Well,
you need
exactly.
direct internet access. And you need this.
We rent the compute, whatever the compute is, versus buy it, and it makes it means it's all OPEX. It means the CAPEX is someone else's problem.
Yep.
There is now what I perceive to be a full 360 move away from the cloud, because it's access to the public internet. Everything has to be connected. It means that companies are losing the option to segregate networks in the fashion that protects them, or indeed has protected them. I spent. And admittedly, there's a bias because, again, not sponsored by Goldilocks. However, they have created a device that allows for the very graceful segmentation of all your kind of crown jewels, that sort of stuff.
You're basically going from digital back to analog, because the digital world has gone so
absolutely integrated. And we'll probably come to this in a second. We will, because it's in the agenda. We'll talk about where 2024 is going to bring us. We really need to get back into this, in my view, physically disconnected, that sort of stuff. Admittedly, I spent a bit of time, full transparency, in Goldilocks, looking at their use cases, and I believe entirely that's where the world.
But if we're going back to the remote worker, and then you've got the remote worker. So as David just mentioned, you're at an airport, you're getting on a flight, you're not within the corporate network to authenticate.
So there's no offline working.
So can you go into coffee shops? So I go into a said Starbucks. How does that work? I mean, when I finished this contract, we'd rolled out to all workspaces. So the client was implemented, and we were then moving on to the mobile version. Now the mobile version is you need to be able to have.
Which is an ever-changing estate.
Ever-changing estate. No, so you get your landing screens. Well, a ZIA policy with zero trust won't allow you to go to a landing page. It will put you into. It'll quarantine you immediately. Your connection drops.
Yeah, DMZ.
So what do you do?
Until you prove who you are, and all the ways we talk
David's
about.
programmed it.
That's where the MFA comes in. But now what you're seeing is not just standard MFA. There's starting to be more biometric MFA.
Yes.
And this is a little bit scary. But so you have standard iris scanning, fingers.
Facial recognition.
Palms, facial recognition.
Well, you'd have trouble recognizing my irises. And also, MFA is not martial arts, by the way. Even though Mr. Stennett does it. Every time he says MFA, I'm like...
MMA versus MFA. But...
no. Can you imagine some years' time when it becomes to MMA, you have to get in the ring to get access to your email? I'm screwed.
Sorry I couldn't work today. Why not? I was fighting.
So you're going down that route, but that's going to cause some other scary things that I don't like. But
it's all part of the zero trust.
It's all part of zero trust kind of thing going on, and which I'll mention quickly before you move on, which is it's coming to Europe with the NIS2 directive, right? As they're starting to push that. That's where I said it gets scary, because now I'm thinking like credit systems and you need to log in, social scoring to get on the internet. I'm a little bit sketched with the EU. I'm a professional. I understand how it works. A lot of the companies are going to have to do it, for better or for worse.
There's actually a film on Netflix at the moment. And it's literally you score your whole life. So if I meet you in the street,
it's
you're not MFA.
Black Mirror.
It's Black Mirror. Correct.
And this does happen in the world.
Well, that scared me.
And that's 2-3 years old.
But
it's 2-3 years old. That's 2-3 years old. Whereupon you're socially scored with how you interact with the world. Now,
frightening.
Scoring in cybersecurity is not a new thing.
But it can come into the workplace, though.
Yeah, well, it's starting to.
How's David today?
Yeah,
if they saw my post on the internet, I wouldn't be allowed on. So that's
right.
By the way, this was pre-recorded before Dave went live.
But you can't, and there are certain, we can say, embargoed countries in the world where scoring on you as a person, if you are. What's an example, which again is covered in the Black Mirror series. I forget the episode where you if you speed, you are and very fast, as is the digital world. You are fined, notified, and socially scored for your mild bending of the law, which might be a speeding fine. It could be something more criminal, whatever it might be, and that could prevent you, if we use the Black Mirror series, hiring in the right car. You get a Ford wheelbarrow versus a Mercedes.
Get in a job.
Well, to discuss the behavior of a user, so you have NDR solutions, right? Network detection response, that are actually using AI to do that, right? Which
is the scary part, right?
Which is also scary, which I like on one hand, because I'm a big positive believer in AI, but in the wrong hands, it's going to be very nasty, right?
Hell yeah.
So that is already taking place and what you would call, like, I don't want to say credit scoring or behavior, but like, I mean, there's definitely risk, like admins or elevated users would have more, things done to them. I mean, in the case of the organization I'm in, I mean, if you're an admin, you have to check out your admin credentials, right?
Yeah.
And they're checked back in, which is really smart.
Yeah, that's cool.
And a lot of companies don't do that.
And that approach, and this goes back to that certain product we won't mention, when you check out your credentials and there's some proactive defense, password spinning, that sort of stuff.
And is that only whenever you want to access applications with a higher hierarchy or level of governance,
elevate principally
you log
elevate
in,
privilege.
once you've used it, you
It
log
gives you
out.
a single-use password for your ADM account, for example.
And once you finish using it, you log out.
You log out.
And it spins the password, which means... Again, keeping the podcast, because we're keen.
Well, that's very smart.
Actually, 2 points I was just going to make. Now we're talking about this. One was the home use network and home one or end user device use. So come back to
this
that
is my home, by the way, my living room.
Wouldn't that be great?
I'm not charging these guys. I'm penny.
Look at the
click this button below to support.
That's coming. So this means that, back to the point about lateral movement, any memory-based credentials are of use on that single machine for the period of time because they're invalidated on the password spinning that happens when the user logs out, which means zero lateral movement. And that's, of course, one of the controls that are many other controls available in that. The point I was going to make about... And again, you can read this. One of the other podcasts that we're a fan of, or indeed I'm a fan of, is the Darknet Diaries. The Darknet Diaries explained the Uber hack and the LinkedIn hack, both of which were the compromise of the engineer's home network and PC.
Right.
So we are in this connected post-COVID working from home or the moon or the coffee shop world. The protection extends beyond the four virtual walls of any company. Right? They extend it right down the pipe to the public Wi-Fi. So zero trust is good in coffee shops because trust nothing is public network. If you look at the history, and maybe in some of the comments, we'll ask Brother Khaled sitting behind the camera to post some of these links. The Darknet Diaries do explain, because it's quite complex how they go about it, and it's already been covered, so best we don't cover it here, about what the real threat is around using networks beyond the four virtual walls of any company. And there's two good examples. Uber, and we all saw the job postings 3 days after the hack. They went after a football team of people to augment their security teams because they realised they'd been lax. LinkedIn was another one. Again, like I say, not to labour the point. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, again, keeping this relevant. So there's obviously some software products that we can use and adopt. Do companies, I guess it's a question to you, David, but also amongst ourselves, do people adopt zero trust wholesale? Do they go through the 5 or 6 points or the 7 points wholesale, or sounds like they start with the likes of MFA?
So, well, we're doing them all, but we are scaling back because, again, it's difficult. And you started with the exact thing that everyone needs to worry about, which is the CMDB or IMDB, whatever you want to call it. IMDB, but that too.
That too. CMDB, IMDB. Click the link below. The IMDB of the CMDB.
The IMDB needs to be accurate too, but the CMDB. So when you're going to onboard applications or anything, that data needs to be accurate. And
of course.
And onboarding like 2 or 3 applications, great, but I've got 1,000 to do, right?
So scaling that exercise,
scaling is very difficult.
Yeah,
and these are not applications that traditionally we would onboard. You would have an application, you'd implement them in a test environment, production, you'd launch them live. Now everything's SaaS.
You've got 3, of course.
It's all internet based. So now it's the connectivity between the organisation,
your 3 environments
vendor,
for each app,
and the actual middleware, which let's say the middleware is.
So you get your testing, your pre-prod, your prod. Well, there might be a hybrid environment with an on-prem mixed on.
So it's as similar as we used to do it, back in the Stone Age. But the amount of work involved is
5 years ago, 10 years ago.
And again,
but Stone Age in cyber terms.
It's Stone Age, and it's not
light years ago,
and it's not port based, and permissions are governed in containers. It's interesting, and it works. It took a hell of a lot more testing than I've ever gone through before.
Right, exactly.
So the technology we're discussing is the easy part, really.
Yeah,
it's really the discovery, which in every organization I've ever been in, their central management or their database is garbage, right? It's always like 80% accurate.
CMDB?
The 3 of you, without getting collectively fired from every future job we unpack.
They know it.
Yeah, I was going to say,
they know
when you go to your stakeholders and you say, how much faith do you have in your Active Directory?
The producer just said zero trust.
Zero
trust. Ring the bell.
The legal guys are like, but on the bit, we have to be controversial to be factual and to be honest, right? So, and we've all had the conversations. We've sat in the same meetings, separately. When you say, how much trust do you have in your various sources of information? And I remember years ago being told, granted things have been moved on, and the only guy or lady or department that knew who'd left the building was the security guys who had a box
pen
of
and
passes.
paper.
A box of passes.
Yeah.
And they knew
Hi,
they'd
Scott.
left. Right? Exactly, right? And then if you go back to AD, won't name any names.
Oh my God!
And you look at the proportion
clean
of
up in
proportion of
Antidirectory.
legacy accounts, and you have to look at last login time, and some of them are years gone by and they've never been removed, and some of them are of elevated privilege.
AD cleaned
It's
up.
terrifying.
And then the beauty when you move from a CMDB or integrated CMDB into Snow.
yeah.
And most of the fields weren't made mandatory, so it's missed everything. So you don't know security levels, SLAs, who the application manager is, who the deputy is. Welcome.
So imagine now I've got 1,000 to do, and and I go by the Pareto rule, right? 80 is okay, 20 is garbage. It's probably more like
80-20 rule, yeah.
Yeah, it's more like 60-40. But so I don't know who to find. So imagine I got to go find an application owner. It might take me a week just to find who owns it, right?
Yeah.
And now scale that by 1,000, and they're paying me how much every day, and another team.
And it's not just you, because
Well, of course. Well, my organization, not a whole lot of us, but
Right.
and some of the others, right? Because everyone's kind of tightening up, right? So you have two choices. You have if they can do this work beforehand, which is go to their app owners. And thank God, my executives, they're really behind this and really pushing it with their colleagues at the executive level, saying, we need this stuff done before we can implement our program.
Yeah.
You guys need to have, the CMDB needs to be accurate with the app owners, the business criticality, because that helps us understand.
I was going to say, so what are your crown jewels, right? They're usually top notch. I mean, you could argue they should always be the first to be ring fence protected, all that kind of stuff. However, they can be...
Well, remember, it's about risk reduction. So if it takes me a month to do a crown jewel, or I can do 10 less,
yeah, exactly.
It's a balancing act.
Of course,
but you're right, generally,
Do you want execs in limos and aeroplanes, or do you want to deliver Kellogg's?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Or keep, if you look, and then some of the things that keep me awake at night are, back in the kind of OT world, when my most recent cyber experience is turning off a hospital, right? Or turning off. I mean, yes, there's the kind of the supply chain for food and drugs for all that kind of stuff.
We've all worked for the companies that deliver food and drugs.
Yeah.
I work for a company that makes the drugs.
Yeah.
You work for a company that powers countries.
Well, exactly.
And if those production environments go down, so as we discussed, OT environments, operational technology, which is predominantly what we're doing, you're doing, the three of us.
Yeah.
Going back to user
the risk reduction strategy, because that carries a lot of...
For user access, let's forget about data quality and data management, which is part of the zero trust, user access. So we have a factory, three of us are working together, one's a vendor, one provides this.
Yeah.
We have users on site, it's 10 users, but we can't turn off a server.
No.
You can't back a server up because it's 24/7 and has to be up because this company produces the largest headache tablet in the planet. Once that server goes down, then the logistics companies are backed up, and then we all know planes don't take off. We're all
You're losing millions an hour.
Please, sir, can I have some more?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if any of us have implemented it. I didn't get to that. So I got to that stage, and it was shared accounts. Previously, in Active Directory, we'd create groups, we'd drop users into that container.
Yeah.
Whereas with these solutions, they're very different in terms of profiles and how they're managed.
Particularly in shared accounts, which I mean, I always think
10 users, one
talking
machine,
of
no
elevated
phone
places,
to
you've got
authenticate.
ADM, you get tech accounts that are involved in processes automated. Usually, you've got sys accounts, tech accounts.
More in terms of shift workers. So,
so there's no opportunity.
So you can't. How do they authenticate with a mobile? That
They can't. A lot of them.
As David was saying,
there's a big problem in organizations I've been in previously where they're having big issues with shared iPad, shared accounts, and what they've been doing as a hack is using IP-based exceptions, right? But those are disappearing.
They're disappearing.
Microsoft, not a shout out to Microsoft, doesn't have solutions for some of these, or they have way that they want you to do exceptions, which is not what you want to do. That's not in zero trust. You don't want to turn stuff off.
Just before Christmas, as I say, it was October time, so a little bit before.
Hi, Microsoft.
And we had the same thing. We had to have
we all love and hate them. Sorry, Danny.
No, it's okay. We had to have a list of natted IP addresses, static IP addresses from all third-party vendors to enable this client to provide a zero trust connectivity. Getting that information, implementing that, because it changes constantly. And the question was going to be the challenges you face, but I think we've covered loads of them as we're talking.
I mean,
it's all about your end users' access and application access and governance, but how easy is it rolling out zero trust when the likes of those users can't access?
Absolutely. So why do we settle on it? We're not just finishing up, Jess, what are the kind of 3-4 things that zero trust depends on? It sounds like, David, you need to have confidence in your data.
Data was the
so your classic sources are around your CMDB, which is your configuration management
end
database,
user, which is Active Directory. Is it correct?
Is it clean? Is it updated? So one of the things you discussed earlier, and what is part of zero trust is certification, right? Yearly certification. So you don't have these where in that old organization, which we're talking about, that had thousands of AD objects that were out of date, right?
Yeah.
That should be certified every year.
Yeah.
And especially when you're in regulated areas, especially in pharma, they get dinged big amount of money for not having GXP, and other type of regulation.
And we're both in pharma, so it's your FDA, your GXP.
I remember the qualification, the GXP environments all have to be qualified. There's also,
and the level of documentation is huge, but that's
for sure.
That's separate. So
there must be, surely. I mean, I've always kind of hoped that in the thinking, at least annually, there's a commercial benefit to going through AD and pulling out your redundant users because your license cost drops. Now, of course, that might be a negotiated cost for a fixed amount of users.
Microsoft charge you for a redundant account?
Yeah,
and what is it? Is it 90 days that they'll actually, it finishes? But if I hire you, and then tomorrow I fire you, and nobody cleans up your account, the company's paying for
this is part of zero
days.
trust. So this is where you go in and you say, how do you onboard a new user, and how do you offboard? And that's part of zero trust.
That's a superb.
And if you haven't logged in a period of time,
you can set a policy.
But again, they're flags for the IT or AD administrator to do so, but it's a cost. So I think that the points you were making, so it's knowing having the correct data, which leads to applications. Your application configuration, so what level of severity and what did you do?
Your classification,
a complete end user list, a device list.
Onboarding, offboarding. Right. So
now the device list gets a little bit more difficult. I mean, I just started a new contract and on Teams, I thought it was phishing.
Right.
So I got this link coming through saying, please click on this survey.
Yeah.
And it was asking for in this company, a 5521 is your login ID. My SAP number.
Yep.
Other details. And I'm like, hang on a minute. So I pinged my manager and said, is this phishing? No, it's completely okay. It looked totally dodged.
So this is a good point. So all this technology we talked about, the last 2 companies I've been in, they actually send those internal phishing emails because at the end of the day, to test you. And if you click them too much, you get talked to.
So I talked to the manager first. Went, no, it's fine. I went, he said it's fine. Boom.
Yeah,
but on that very point, I had a conversation. And I was being presented to part of a OT thing I was at a few months back. And if you fail these sort of phishing, you click on the link, you become a high risk user.
You get a curriculum.
You go into a list and they start speaking. Depending on how many times you, dare we say, fall foul of the phishing test. I don't know if they give you an etch a sketch and a pen and paper. It would come a point in time, but you are subject to more training because you are a high risk user.
Indeed, I just thought of one when we were saying before. One of our points was. Like a real life situation where zero trust works, doesn't work. And it's not really relevant, but it is relevant to David's point that without clear data, nothing's going to work.
Correct.
So we rolled out phase 1 and I initiated, it took me 3 months to go through 400 business critical applications.
Right.
Got in touch personally with all 400 and said, is this your app? Who's your IT owner? Who's your tech owner? Populated CMDB.
Yep.
And then basically segregated all of the high priority level 1 applications. They came first.
Sorry, you make it laugh. The number of times we've taken a dump and you end up, that becomes the gospel. Because and you always hope as a project manager that sanitized data finds its way back in. Then the project closes and you often do something else and you know it never changes.
As we said, info matters. I did a dump.
Good info matters.
So anyways, we did all the testing and then day 1 we rolled out to said application users. We tested all the applications. Guess what happens? A P1 gets thrown up because the application for payroll management was ranked as not critical. So all of Ireland that manages the payrolls, literally every bell and whistle, every incident management,
every flashing light, you name it.
And guess who it came to?
Yeah, of course you know. Who's the project manager? Let's show.
And again, if that data had been correct, the rollout would have been.
And we should also remember that a lot of the zero trust sounds very enterprisey. Once we talk about the NIST 2, which is certainly enterprise level, we should talk a little bit about how your average mom and pop business, dare we say, small scale SME business can do some of this zero trust stuff. I mean, the clues in the name is trust nothing.
Yep.
But listen, let's talk a little bit about NIST 2. So So you've read the updates? I haven't.
Well,
So
I don't know much, so I'm interested.
So the European Union, they have it online. I've gone through it, and it's really a new update to their data protection, right? And which I don't remember the name of the original one. As an American, right? Well, no.
I should know this because I've read this.
Come on, 61850
ruling.
Euro boys.
Yeah,
but,
the 61850 ruling. It's not the official name, but it does start. But the original NIST covers a lot of the criteria, and of course we're alluding to in this 2 update. So.
Yeah, how you can hold data. So the new version basically is really zero trust to medium to large enterprises, right? It kind of excludes smaller ones for now.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think how a medium-sized business is going to enforce MFA and these zero trust things. I mean, obviously, if they're using cloud-based things, it's there.
Button click, dare we say?
It's there.
And most small enterprises will use cloud-based services. They don't want to have their own on-prem.
Yeah. So even the Office 365s, the Googles, if you're a one user, one domain business, you can still do that. So I mean, we would always advocate MFA as a minimum,
you should be seeing it already on your LinkedIn, on your banking.
So it's always
already getting enforced. Even there's no kind of change management informing.
They're
it's
just
like
doing
I'm
it.
locked out of one of my securities accounts already from the U.S. because it doesn't recognize a European number. So I'm like, oh great. So I got to figure that out. But it was just enforced on me without a warning.
Zero comes. Isn't that the way?
It's going to.
But it's an example of how zero trust is not impacting the end user in the right way, because your end user doesn't have. We have knowledge. We're in the IT industry, and that was news to me because it's not something that I keep track of.
And maybe this is certainly a topic for a future podcast episode where we talk about the pace of change. Now, I would argue when it comes to cybersecurity, days and hours is light years in risk terms. It can be hard to project manage stuff because you're governed by process and policy and that sort of stuff. And I'm always of the opinion, and excuse my French, shit just doesn't go fast enough.
No,
the compromisers, they don't care. We must do stuff faster, and it's back to the point you were making where. So David got no comms on this change, right? Yeah. So what would you rather do? Be more secure and beg forgiveness, or be less secure and write the email? I would argue the former.
That actually relates back to that mess that the old here's a bus, let's crawl under it.
Yeah.
Woof.
Yeah,
was me.
Been there.
Was the change was in place. The direct order was in place.
Yeah.
The comms to the end users was in place.
Nice.
But when it was done, because on the list that was provided by the manager of the VIPs, included a VIP in their test list, it all went south. So the technology worked, the change worked, the process worked,
but the PR, but the
internal communications didn't work.
The earlier discussion. So with the EU, right? It's really about the rapid. They're making it a law, and so this is going to be a shuffle or hurry to get there, right?
Yeah.
Which is the problem. It's not the technology. Now, my point earlier about being scary is the EU's trying to be like one of our Far Eastern friends,
more draconian
who want to maybe do a social kind of credit thing. Maybe I'm a conspiracy guy, but we'll see what that comes to be. But really, from an organization standpoint, obviously you implement it, right? If there's no gun to your head with a compliance law, then there's all these things that we're discussing with data and all this other stuff for zero
GDPR
trust.
When that got thrown,
when that rolled out, But I mean, I'm somewhere in the middle between JFDI. Because there comes a point where and there's Australia and the US are leading kind of the way on taking a GDPR approach to applying the enforcement of this and making people responsible and making a proportion of your revenue. GDPR defined 4% or 5% of your profit. I think it is the fines on cyber risk are 4% of revenue plus criminal investigation against the person. Which is making people.
Well, that's all GDPR. If you look at,
but this is the new cyber legislation.
Yeah, but every website you go to, anything you want to connect to, please accept all cookies. Please accept this.
Yeah.
Basically, everybody who provides a service is making the end user liable.
Well, they're passing on the liability.
Well, you know who's driving all this zero trust? Really, in my opinion, it's insurance companies.
Of course.
If you don't do zero trust in your organization,
you're not covered.
You're not covered.
If you get a malware attack and you weren't secure.
Yep.
And that's an episode in itself around how can you be insured? Is cyber risk really insurable? And I think we're on the cusp of no. But
if you think it's funny when I say I took a dump, wait until I get onto Trojans with my American buddy.
Absolutely. A few minutes to go, guys. So we've talked a little bit about. So this too is basically zero trust, which of course is the nature of the
with
the
data
theme
protections.
with data protection. Yeah, an overlap, of course.
Additional.
The cover of this episode. Smaller businesses. I mean, a couple of headlines I think that are reasonable is MFA, multi-factor authentication. However you do it, be that SMS app based. It should be the minimum most services and apps and all these kind of platforms will enforce. It should feel weird to you, in my opinion, if you're not doing that when you log in. If it's just a simple username and password referred to as basic authentication, you should have a second factor, be that an SMS.
So what do you think is a final, what do you think organisations face or pitfalls they face when implementing a zero trust?
Which is kind of
solution?
Back to the point, and we'll put some links to some key documents under this. There's that kind of multi-factor authentication, you've got the user, the network, the device, what we call the kind of 5 or 6 aspects.
So the biggest bang for your buck without you guys hiring me is single sign-on. Get single sign-on in your organization best you can. Start forcing your vendors to include that in their roadmaps.
Yep.
So we're seeing that a lot of applications are not able to do it currently.
And
we're a pretty big organization, but we're not the biggest. So when we go tell them, they basically do the and they're like, we'll do it when we want. But if everyone starts to say, as part of procurement, you want to do business in this organization, your application must have MFA ability and must integrate with AWS or Azure or cloud, whatever, and these kind of things. And that makes our lives easier to onboard applications into zero trust.
I mean, one pitfall, as I mentioned before, I noticed, is that we had to raise a number of tickets with Microsoft purely for the IP addressing of the new gateways.
Because when you want to whitelist or blacklist,
we don't have a solution for Mac users or Jamf.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're using Intune with the applications, but Jamf is for the application side of
using
I mean, they're two different things, different operating systems, but at the end of the day, even Microsoft had to step back and go, we've not dealt with that before either. So that was the biggest pitfall we found, and David mentioned it at the start of the conversation.
With the IPs and stuff as they disappear in the SD-WAN and these kind of things coming in, Microsoft's having big trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, we spent a lot of time around Microsoft technologies. We've all been migrating to and from that, to that mainly for the 20 years. I think it's fair to say we all cut our teeth in migrating stuff to stuff. And I know we know there's aspects of Microsoft that still need to be fixed, and we're not advocating that they're angels in that regard. However, we spend a lot of time around their tech. So wrapping this up, gentlemen, we a couple of things. We'll put some links to some of the content and documents that we found. Again,
and any questions you've got, please send them to
please.
us.
Feedback.
There'll be a forum,
we always envisage this to be a conversation, so we're not claiming that we are absolutely the verbatim sources of all this sort of stuff. If you have strong opinions, happy to discuss.
And there will be a GDPR pop-up at the start, because we take no action whatsoever or responsibility for the content of this chat.
Absolutely. All said with a bit of tongue-in-cheek. Hopefully it's been a bit informational, dare we say.
So please send us comments, send us questions, send us regards, tell us how we look.
All that kind of stuff.
And maybe I'll do a dump for you.
Exactly.
It's good night from him. Good night from him. And good night from me.
And so,
thank you very much, Dave.
Exactly.
Hopefully we'll get you back on the show again soon.
Yes, my man.
Thanks, brother.
No doubt there'll be other conversations. So we'll bid you a happy and healthy...
And keep safe. Zero trust.
Zero trust to 2024. Multi-factor authentication, basic authentication, and all that kind of good stuff.
#InfoMatters.
Information. We'll see you guys very soon.
Bye now.